Well, the anti-gun groups are going after Ruger now. In fact, they're suing them. Now that Glock has changed their designs, they're suing Ruger to discontinue the RXM. And today I want to talk about whether I think they will discontinue or modify the RXM and whether or not I think they should. Hey everybody, Yankee here. I'm sure most of you are already aware that Glock has changed how they're making their guns. They've discontinued most of their guns and they're going with the Gen V now that has a different internal design. And it isn't really new, it's just different. It's already something they had. It's their performance center trigger system that doesn't use the cruciform trigger. They've gone to that now as the standard trigger bar system in their gun, and they've made some slight changes to the slide and the back plate. And as you know, the reason they did this is because the state of California outlawed that cruciform trigger system, that trigger bar that has that little cross section on it. And they did that because they said it made it too easy to make them fully automatic. All you had to have was a little Glock switch that had a little wedge on it that shoves in there and actually prevents the bar from coming back up, and the gun goes fully automatic. So they made some slight changes to make it to where that's not the case with Glocks anymore. But since they did that, a lot of people are saying, they sold out. And I disagree completely. I don't think they sold out. I think they got ahead of the anti-gunners. Because California was the first state. There's other states looking at doing it. Probably going to be Illinois, New York, etc. Some big markets where there's a lot of people. This could really catch hold and cost Glock a lot of sales. And Glock basically makes one type of gun. So if they hadn't made that change in all these states where they become illegal, they couldn't sell any guns because that's the only type of gun they make. So they decided, we're going to make this slight change, get ahead of this, and then they don't have a leg to stand on. We can still keep selling in California because the models we have that are approved there, we can keep selling them because they now don't have this system that is illegal there, and we don't have to worry about it happening in other states either. So like I said, I don't think they actually caved. I think they beat the anti-gunners at their own game. But now those anti-gunners, since Glock has changed, they're going after some of the clones. And one of them they're going after is the Ruger, the RXM. In fact, they are suing Ruger to discontinue the RXM. So Ruger pretty much is going to have to either fight the lawsuit, keep making the guns the way they are, or they're going to have to modify them or discontinue them. And someone asked me last night, what do I think about that? Do I think Ruger will do that, or do I think Ruger should? Because they know I agreed with Glock doing it, and I said it was them actually getting ahead of the bad guys here, the anti-gunners. Well, there's a big difference between Ruger and Glock. As I was saying a few minutes ago, Glock makes one type of gun. That's it. That's all they do. They make one type of gun in different sizes. So when that trigger bar system got outlawed, that was every gun that they could sell in California now couldn't be sold unless they made this change. And they have the California market. They have some guns approved there. They have guns, pretty much where they can sell everywhere. They have some approved. Anywhere there's a roster, mainly California. So they would lose that market and potentially lose other markets if this law spreads. So they would lose the ability to sell any of their guns. Ruger, however, is different. Ruger makes all kinds of guns. The RXM is just one type of gun they make. It's one model of gun they make. It's not even a big part of their catalog. It's not a big part of their sales yet. It's still relatively new. And it wasn't approved to sell in California anyway. So this law in California doesn't affect them at all. So there's no motivation for them to alter the gun to be able to keep the California market because they already couldn't sell it there. And if this law goes to other places, they won't be able to sell that one gun there either. Not a huge loss to them. It's not like with Glock where they would lose the ability to sell all their guns. They would only lose the ability to sell one model. And this model is basically a Gen 3 Glock that apparently does work with the Glock switches, etc. So any law that bans that, cruciform trigger system would ban this gun. But like I said, the one state that's passed that law, they already can't sell this model gun there. And if the other states pass it, well, they'd lose one model in those states. Unlike Glock, like I said, they would lose all their models. So there really isn't as much motivation for them to change the gun. They're not really going to lose out on a lot of sales. Just no reason for it. They can still sell everywhere they could sell before, and even if they lose a state or two, not going to be a huge blow to Ruger. but it could be a huge benefit to Ruger. In fact, I think that they are more motivated to keep the design the way it is because I think it would be beneficial to them in the long run. Even if a couple of other states pass the same law as California. Like I said, they didn't lose any sales in California because they couldn't already sell there. But even if they lose sales in a couple of other states, I think the sales they make elsewhere will really, really make up for it and then some. Because here's the thing, they'll still be a true Glock. You know, true to what the original Glocks were like. And I think a lot of people will see it that way. They'll be like, I can't get this system that was so proven and so popular in the Glocks anymore because they changed so that they could keep selling their guns. But I can get this Ruger that works just like the old Gen 3s. So even though, like I said, they wouldn't be able to sell in California, which they can't already anyway, for now, they can sell everywhere else. And they can pick up some of that business that Glock might shed because people thinking they don't like the new design, it's not proven, etc. Even though that's, I don't really think true, but a lot of people will feel that way, and maybe they'll go buy the Glock or the Ruger instead of the Glock. So it could really boost the RXM sales. I said, not losing nothing because it couldn't already sell in California, but now that they get a lot of the Glock fans transferring over to the RXM, that's a big sales increase for them. So I think that it's better for them business-wise to leave it the way it is. Like I said, I thought that it was best for Glock to change it because they would lose those markets, period. And there'd be no reason for people to buy more of them if they weren't discontinuing them, so really wouldn't gain anything. So what they did is change it slightly, keep their market share, keep selling their guns. Now, they will lose a few people, but I don't think many. Most people aren't in the know. Most people won't even know there's been a change. I guarantee you, most people who walk into a gun shop and they're like, I want to buy my first handgun, or I want to buy a handgun. I heard Glocks are good. We're still going to buy a Glock. They're not going to know anything about all this stuff. They're not going to know what the difference between a Gen V, a Gen 5, Gen 4, Gen 3. And they're not going to care. So they're going to keep most of their market. They might shed a little bit of it, but that won't be nearly what they would have lost if they lost California completely, or if they lost bigger states later like New York or Illinois. So they got ahead of that. They took care of the problem. But like I said, Ruger doesn't have that problem. This is one gun they sell, not a big part of their sales total. And they stand to gain the people who leave Glock and still want that old system, just like a lot of other Glock clones do. You know, if those people weren't selling in California anyway because they weren't approved, well, they got nothing to lose. They've only got to pick up, some of the people that leave Glock. And Ruger is going to be one of the one of the bigger companies that benefits the most from that. So I think they shouldn't change their gun because it does leave an alternative for people who still want the old Glock system in a big name brand gun that they trust the manufacturer, etc., but still has that tried and true old Glock system. So until other states start passing laws, I don't think they should change because I think they got nothing to lose and everything to gain because I think they will pick up some of those people that leave Glock. And like I said, they're not losing any of the market that they didn't have because they didn't sell there. So they'll sell every gun they've sold up till now. They'll sell just as many. They have the same market as they ever had before, only now they got the benefit of the people who still want the old Glock style gun, from a major company. They'll pick up those people, so they'll probably sell even more. Please hit that like button and share this video on whatever social media you have. Since this is a restricted channel, you're the only chance we have to overcome YouTube's anti-2A bias and discrimination.